Berserk has me like, man, I don't feel like working out today. Maybe tomorrow. Yeah, motherfucker! Berserk was published in 1997, written by Kentaro Miura. Rest in peace, King. Rest in peace. I read it not too long ago, and if I had to give you my thoughts about it, I will say that it's like the continuation of the Bible. I will say that it changed my life. Look at me here. And now look at me here. I mean, I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm on my way. And that is because I want to be like Guts, the protagonist of Berserk. I find him just as inspiring, if not even more than Spider-Man. It might be because I feel tired of superheroes at the moment, but reading Berserk genuinely turned me into a completely different person. But first, a warning that I shouldn't give. If you find anything offensive about Berserk, you probably think that mayo is too spicy, or you don't understand what dark fantasy means. So with that out of the way, if you get angry, you can go get... Berserk starts with the protagonist, Guts, having sex with an apostle. That is basically like a demon in this universe. And just out of nowhere, Guts decides to kill the apostle. Then we move on to Guts killing some bandits because they were mistreating an elf, Puck, who is kinda my favorite character. But at this point, it's clear that the intention of Kentaro Miura is to sell us the idea that Guts is some kind of edgelord without any feelings. But that is not the case, because sooner than later, we can see Guts crying. He's incredibly rude to everyone, but those are not his true intentions. He's just avoiding contact with other human beings because he's incredibly hurt. The first arc is the Black Swordsman, and it is really great. Definitely what made me fall in love with Berserk. It does a great job of introducing you to the universe and their main antagonists, the God Hand, who Guts is trying to kill along with the apostles, but mostly it's just Guts being an edgelord. If I had to choose an arc that convinced me that this is the best manga ever created, it would be the Golden. Guts was born in a puddle of mud and adopted by some mercenaries, which is a pretty messed up start for a kid. One of the first things that you'll notice about Guts is that he doesn't like being touched, but there's a reason for that, and it's one of the first things that we see in the Golden Age, and it's honestly pretty sad. You'll notice that Guts, like Spider-Man, can't catch a goddamn break, but unlike Spider-Man or other Western heroes, Guts has something that I like, and that is that he doesn't complain. Like ever. He doesn't complain about the cards that he's been given in life, and I'm not saying that to make Spider-Man or other Western heroes less, but because this is something that had an impact in my life. Guts going through the most difficult and messed up things, and he never complains. This introduced me to a new philosophical branch. Well, not new, but Berserk motivated me to read more about it. Stoicism. Many people get the wrong idea about Stoicism. They think that Stoicism is not caring about anything, but that's wrong. One of the most common things that you'll see about Stoic studies is that they teach you not to worry about things outside of your control. That even worrying about them is stupid, because you can't change them. And that the best thing that you can do is doing your best without expecting anything in return. And after reading and watching a lot of media, I think that there's no other character that represents Stoicism better than Guts. He went through a terrible childhood, and even as an adult he can't catch a break. And despite that, there's something inside of him that doesn't allow him to give up. And I find that inspiring. After all that, Guts meets a mercenary, Griffith, and the contrast between these two characters is astounding. Yet they are similar in a way, even if one is the incarnation of testosterone in a human being and the other is the perfect femboy. Griffith is pretty much an idealized character. He looks like a child, and everyone follows him because of that aura. In that same way, he's motivated by a childlike dream. He wants his own kingdom. Griffith's relationship with Guts is complicated, because unlike Griffith, Guts doesn't have a dream. But having Griffith as a friend gave meaning to his life, so his only goal was to help Griffith achieve his dream. And leaving all the mass murder aside, that is a pretty noble thing to do. There's the Band of the Hawk. Their leader is Griffith, and despite their undying loyalty to Griffith, he doesn't consider them friends. He doesn't consider anyone his friends. He says that in God's face, that the only person that he can consider a friend is someone who is his equal.
They are my able soldiers, it's true. They are dedicated comrades who sacrifice themselves for my dream so that it might be real. But that does not make them friends. In my mind, a true friend never relies on another's dream. The man who would be my friend must have his own reason for living, beyond me. For me to call a man my friend, he must be equal to me in all respects.
Which leads Guts to find his own way. But it's pretty interesting what Griffith says, because at this point, Griffith is attracted to everything that he can't have, which is something that we have in all of us. When Guts announces that he is leaving the Band of the Hawk, Griffith is willing to kill Guts just so he can have that which he can't. And maybe Guts is like that in some way, but there is a difference in how they express those feelings. Guts is constantly fighting his own demons, while Griffith avoids them, thinking that will be his demise later on. He was trying to get his own kingdom, and the fastest way was to marry the princess, which he wasn't even attracted to. But to deal with the feelings of the loss of Guts, he had with the princess. And when the king found out about that, he practically tortured Griffith for a whole year. His dream was dead. He couldn't even walk anymore. He was just a living corpse. And that leads me to another way in which Berserk changed my life. Many times we hurt others because we don't want to deal with our own emotions, or we hurt ourselves in different ways to deal with our feelings. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can meditate, or simply ask ourselves why we feel the way that we feel. Guts is constantly lying down, constantly meditating about life, and that is another valuable thing that I learned from Berserk. The way that we deal with our feelings has a great impact in our lives and in the lives of others. There's one thing that I should have mentioned earlier, the Behelit. This is an object that makes the God Hand appear, and in exchange for someone loved, they grant you any wish, be it never grow up, more power, or your own kingdom. This will be important in a few seconds. Casca is a member of the Band of the Hawk, and she starts being pretty unlikable, but that was the intention of Kentaro Miura. She's a character that above all else cares about the approval of Griffith. She was a little girl when she was going to be sold as a slave. She tried to run away, but she was caught, and she was going to be raped. But Casca was saved by Griffith, or so she believed. Griffith only threw her a sword, but that meant everything to her. The spark of hope that Griffith gave to Casca meant the world to her. And when Guts enters the equation, he disrupts the source of Casca's happiness, the approval from her savior. And she even gets jealous of how Guts was treated by Griffith. But this hatred eventually turns into a sort of love for Guts, and eventually they bond, and she helps Guts overcome his childhood trauma, and is something beautiful, but nothing lasts forever. Remember about Griffith being tortured by the king? Well, he lost everything, even his ability to walk or talk. But Griffith owned a Behelit, and the thing that he did was awful. In a desperation move, he caused something called the Eclipse. He sold all of his friends, the Band of the Hawk, to the God Hand, and all of them were killed, to get his own kingdom, and to get back his ability to walk and talk. Even more so than that, he basically became a god. Gods had to see his only friends at that point being murdered because Griffith couldn't let go of his dream. But that wasn't even the worst thing at that point. Do you remember what was about to happen to Casca before she was saved by Griffith? Well, he ended up doing that very same thing to her. Guts basically had to see the love of his life being raped by his best friend. All of this while he lost an eye and an arm. Guts pretty much lost everything that he had, but instead of wallowing in despair, he decided to get stronger, so he could get revenge on the people that made him lost everything. And although that is not something to admire, you have to accept the fact that it takes a tremendous amount of willpower to even get up after that. If you think that I gave you a big spoiler, that's not the case. I already knew what was going to happen in the clips even before starting to read Berserk. And you know how Berserk solves that? By making you not want the eclipse to happen, by making you care about Guts and Griffith's relationship, by caring about Casca and the other members of the Band of the Hawk. And when this happens, you can't help but feel like you read something only compared to a Shakespearean tragedy. Before the God Hand or Griffith could kill Casca and Guts, they are saved by Skull Knight. You don't know who he is? Well, Berserk fans neither. After Guts is saved by him, he passes away and wakes up a few days later in a cave. Then he remembers about his lost friends, and he just explodes because of the overwhelming emotions. But just before he could keep feeling despair, Skull Knight appears, and says something that changed my life. Struggle, challenge, and rise to struggle again. That's the only sword a struggler can use against death. Don't ever forget that. Those words follow me every day that I exercise and I feel like I can't. Some people are rude to me and I feel like a loser. Sometimes bad thing happens to me and I feel like there's nothing for me to look forward to. But then I remember these words and it's like a shot of adrenaline because... I say to myself, If Guts lost everything in the worst way possible and still keeps fighting, why shouldn't I? Do I think that Guts is a loser? No! Then why should I be a loser? Even as I'm recording this, my mom was at the hospital, and I felt pretty sad these past few days, but depression doesn't hit as hard as it used to. And one of the reasons is Berserk. The indomitable human will of gods is contagious. There's another arc in Berserk named The Lost Children. And it's not my favorite, but it has one of my favorite moments. There's a girl named Jill, and she's abused in her home, so she wants to go with gods. Despite seeing the kind of stuff that gods deals with every day. But at some point, gods tells her, there is no paradise for you to escape to. And that is just a simple dialogue. Sure, but it strikes me more profoundly. Basically, Guts is telling us that there is no way to run from our problems, that the only way to fight them is to face them. Running away just makes things worse, which is the point that Berserk tries to make. The manga starts like in the middle of the series, and then it goes back to the beginning, and then we go back to where we started. Kinda like Devil May Cry. Between the Black Swordsman and when we go back to the middle of the series, there's the implication that Guts is not trying to get justice, rather revenge for what was done to him. And that the real justice will be him staying with Casca. That there is no need to escape from those that you love. And that is other thing that I admire about Guts. You see, we are constantly bombarded with the idea from media of various sources that having many partners somehow makes you better or is empowering. But I find more inspiring that Guts is loyal to Casca. And I mean, Guts is like 8 feet tall and lifts a sword that is probably heavier than Nikocado, has a jawline that could cut your eyes by just looking at it. I mean, Guts could have multiple relationships with many women, but even then he decides to be loyal to Casca, because that is not only what it feels right, it's the right thing to do. And well, I don't have a girlfriend, but it doesn't matter, because now that I read Berserk, my chances of ever getting a real girlfriend are non-existent. The joke of putting the video in black and white and sad music was funny in 2008, but now it's no longer funny, but it is okay because it is a Berserk reference. Let me tell you something, I genuinely dislike Rick and Morty. Mostly this idea that life is meaningless. There is something really contradictory about that show. The protagonist, Rick Sanchez, despite saying that life is meaningless, still gets depressed. What's the point of getting depressed? Your depression is pointless anyway. Nihilism is a self-contradictory philosophy, because it states that life has no meaning, but in the end of the day, you are the one giving value to that assertion. So you are shooting yourself on the foot. If life is meaningless, why are you depressed? If life is meaningless, why can't you shake the feeling that there is something wrong with your life? The worst thing is that a few years ago, it was only Rick and Morty. Nowadays we are bombarded with shows and media that embrace this nihilistic philosophy, that your actions shouldn't have consequences, and that you can do whatever you want. After all, life is meaningless. It gives you a free way to indulge in all of the pleasures that you want. You are going to die and life is horrible anyway. I used to be depressed all of the time, mostly about things outside of my control. And I used to bought into this nihilistic philosophy that life has no meaning. Yet I was depressed. I used to basically do all that I wanted. Yet I had a void inside of myself that it was impossible to fill. It wasn't until I held myself to a higher standard that I started to be happier. I started to exercise, read, meditate, and other things that basically summarize to chasing a better version of myself. My point with all of this is that people often misunderstand nihilism. The point of nihilism is not to make you depressed. The point of nihilism is to push you to become the Ubermensch, the man that can fight against destiny itself, and there is no better representation of that than Guts. Guts represents both, dying for something greater than yourself and living for something greater than yourself. That's why for me, Guts shines brighter than most characters in fiction, because Guts represents the masculine urge to never give up. The point of nihilism is not that you should give up, it's that despite your effort might be meaningless tomorrow, still you should give your best today. And I have no other words than thanking Kentaro Miura for writing the best dark fantasy manga that exists, because thanks to him, we know that we're struggles. We should struggle and rise, just to struggle again, and we don't have to forget that. And it's not only that. His manga is filled with beautiful art made by himself, the thought-provoking themes that he touches, everything. Berserk changed me and made me want to be a better person, and that's the best kind of art. If everything is okay, I'll be uploading this video on May 6th. Today's been 2 years since Kentaro Miura died, and there's honestly no words to describe how much his work helped me into becoming a better version of myself, and I'll be eternally grateful for that. And well, that's it for this video. I hope that at this point, at least you feel some interest in giving Berserk a try. I'm Spider Dash, and I'll see you the next time. And for the time being, I will go back to struggle.